Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing very well and you are settled in well into the course. We will do well to proceed as we have done, and hopefully you should create some good grades for yourself. Okay, so in this video, we are going to engage a little bit of a top-up on what we have learned so far from Ortega and his defense of, man's nature being not fixed. We have already engaged that, and I told you we will top up a bit with a discussion on free will and determinism, since he seems to be making allusions to man being compulsorily free. Then it makes, it makes, what's the expression? It becomes important to discuss what we mean by being free and the implications it has on moral responsibility, being responsible for our claims of morality. Okay, so this content I suspect will be relatively shorter, but will engage that theme. On the screen, therefore, you see free will, determinism, and the question of moral responsibility. Free will, determinism, and the question of moral responsibility. And for an outline, we'll look at understanding determinism, the problematic implications, that's the denial of free will. Implications means what will arise when we hold on to a determinist view of morality. Okay, soft and hard determinism. Indeterminism, that's also called free willism, free will, free willism. Then a challenge for indeterminism. We'll finally look at some conclusions that will guide our thoughts in discussions of determinist and free will, free willist. Okay. So how would you understand determinism briefly and for our level? Okay, determinism is a view that all things are causally conditioned such that they could not be otherwise. All things are causally. The emphasis is on causally. You want to be careful not to write it as casually. Okay, casually is not the same as causally. So look at this. This is as if you were spelling the word cause. All things are causally conditioned. It means the determinist argument is that when it comes to establishing the causes of things, there is always a conditioned cause for the things that happen. Whatever happens was caused ultimately, okay, by something else. So we will look at the various, views of determinism, the soft and the hard. But for now, just understand that when we talk of a deterministic view of morality or a determinist view of anything at all, it just means the view that all things are causally conditioned such that they could not have been otherwise. The determinist view poses a difficulty for the question of moral responsibility as we know it traditionally. Think about it. If everything was ultimately caused, then, in other words, caused by something outside of yourself, you didn't cause it. It was conditioned to happen. Then how would we, ethically speaking or morally speaking, hold anyone accountable, responsible for the actions and inactions that they embark on or fail to embark on? Think about a thief who is caught red-handed stealing, who appeals to a deterministic view that, oh, I'm sorry, but I couldn't have helped it. It was meant to be. Whoa. How do you hold such a person responsible if determinism were true? Okay. So we want to be careful when we talk about, what has been said is what will come. Dagrafa. What will be, will be. There will be implications for morality. The rapist would only say that it was meant to be so. I was meant to rape. It was already preconditioned. So is it a view that has some merit at all, the determinist view, especially in the context of morality and the the issue of moral responsibility or accountability. Now, the problematic implications of determinism for morality is what I have earlier, discussed. If it is true that all things are causally conditioned, then this must also apply to our willing and our choosing. Take note, I highlight that. This means the denial of free will, and for many, the end of morality. If I couldn't freely choose to do what I have done, then how am I accountable for it so as to be responsible for it? So I've given those two scenarios of the rapist, someone who has raped another person, but then presupposes that, look, I didn't freely choose, that my will wasn't free. I did the act, but I didn't do it out of free will. If I didn't have desires, for example, then I wouldn't have stolen that which wasn't mine. So this person's case would be that I was determined to have feelings. I have a certain um, desire which wasn't placed there by myself. That's the extreme case that some people make. It was the devil, some would say. Some would say, I couldn't have helped it. If I was created a stone, perhaps I wouldn't have raped anybody, and so on and so forth. Now, if my will is already conditioned, like we saw on the earlier slide, willing and my choosing, capacity of choice is already imposed on me, can I then be held responsible? That is, if there is no free will, if my will isn't free, yes, I willed it, but I didn't will freely, then perhaps we might not be able to hold people accountable. Or what do you say? So that will lead us to some two different views of determinism shortly. But before then, on the screen you see, because it seems obvious that morality presupposes free will. Morality, the question of right and wrong, suggests that persons can choose to do or not to do. So when I tell you, you shouldn't have done that, it is based on the assumption that you could have done something differently than what you did. That is how come I'm able to judge, I'm able to prescribe, I'm able to evaluate your action. But where you had no other option, it is difficult to make meaning of moral judgments. What would it mean to say that X is wrong or X is right? Unless the person who acted could choose to do otherwise and so didn't do it, then it makes sense to say you shouldn't have done so. So when there is a denial of free will, it becomes difficult to hold people accountable. Now, this is what the determinist argues again. The determinist thinks our will is already presupposed, our will is already conditioned, and therefore that might raise a question of what? Responsibility issues when it comes to morality. What meaning is there in praise and blame and holding people morally responsible for their actions and inactions if because of antecedent factors they could not have done otherwise? You see, this is the question. Suppose they couldn't have done otherwise because of antecedent factors. Can we then hold them responsible? You should be reflecting on some case scenarios like that. Perhaps the question might be, is it really the case that they could not have done otherwise? They could not have acted differently? Maybe we think there wasn't any other option, but could it have been? If it were so that people's will is already preconditioned in a certain way, can they be held morally responsible for their actions? If I do not act and choose freely, that's the question down there. Is it meaningful to hold me responsible for my actions and inactions? Now that is clear. Before a person is blamed or praised for his or her action or inaction, doesn't it matter whether one, the person was forced 2, dragged. I mean, dragged as in they put a drag in your food and you ate it. And that is what made you react that way. Could it be that the person was under some form of compulsion? Free will, therefore, seems to be a condition for responsible moral action. And that is why, if it is denied, then it raises questions of responsibility morally, questions of moral responsibility. Now, note the determinists claim that people have no control over their actions and inactions, whether good or evil. We're talking about extreme determinists here. And this is presented in a crude way to help you just get the main idea. Then we can interrogate the particular details subsequently. Okay. The determinists claim that people have no control over their actions and inactions, whether good or evil. Has no bearing on those actions being nevertheless good or evil. You see, we are telling you something. Note that the determinists claim that people have no control over their actions and inactions, whether good or evil, has no bearing on those actions being nevertheless good or evil. Okay? Desiring to torture starving children, for example, should be recognized as an evil act, according to the determinists. So they accept that the act may be considered evil. But the issue is the act being evil has nothing to do with the one causing it. You cannot say that the person who acted that way caused the act. That is the issue under discussion. The determinist hasn't said that everything people do is good. Neither have they said everything you do is bad. We are establishing causality. Who caused it? The determinist says there are always antecedent conditions that lead to the people's actions. And so if it is determined to be so, then you treat their actions, people's actions, as a sickness that has to be treated, not that they should be punished for it. You can only punish people if they are, according to the determinist too, if they did the act and they caused the act. But the determinist says, yes, you may think that the person did the action, he did it, but who caused it? The cause cannot be just the person doing its fault, but there are always antecedent conditions attached to that. So that is the blunt view of the determinist. You do not punish a patient with cancer. Yes, the action may be cancerous, what the person did may be wrong, but you try to treat or heal the cancer, not to blame the cancer, on the patient. You don't punish the patient for having a cancer. That's how the determinists, would want to treat morally reprehensible actions, okay, from people. They'll say, if you are a determinist, the argument is it's not the person that is causing that bad action, even though he or she is the one doing it, but he's not the one causing it. There might be something. So the rapist may have suffered from family, what the word, brutalism, or might have been tortured himself or herself. Someone might have. So they will now open out their argument better, and we'll look at. So 2 types of determinism. Determinism can be viewed in 2 lights: the hard determinist and the soft determinist. Okay? The hard determinist says not only are all things determined, but they are determined ultimately by purely external factors outside of yourself and over which you have no control, such as the circumstances of your birth, your upbringing, your education, the environment, your genetic structure, etc. Okay? So for the hard determinist, you choose X over Y because of these external factors. Emphasis external. It's not internal to you. It's not something you have grown within yourself. It is actually as a result of things external to yourself. So you are being conditioned by such factors, okay, which have contributed to what shaping your will in favor of X over Y. That is why we should treat that action that you have embarked on, not blame you, but treat it. If we think it is not a good action and we are trying to get you out of that kind of action, like say a drug addict, like say a rapist, a killer, what's the other one, an armed robber. We think that our action is wrong, perhaps, yes. So we treat it. That is what the thinking behind punishment should be, what we call punishment, to restore you, to help you heal of that negativity. There's the hard determinist, because they would say that there is nobody who embarks on any action because they want to do it. Everything is preconditioned or is as a result of antecedent conditions. For the hard determinist, which is what? External to the person. However, for the soft-determinists, they also agree with the hard determinists that events or actions have antecedent conditions. However, for the soft-determinists, they argue that this cause, this antecedent cause, lies within the individual, the person, I should say, okay? Not external to the person, but within. It is something emanating from yourself, within. So our actions and choices are determined by internal factors such as our desires, inclinations, attitudes, or in a word, our character. If you want to say it in one word, you say a subai. So the person is behaving that way because of misubai, because of his character, her character. In other words, it is still you. You are accountable. There are antecedent conditions, but antecedent conditions arising from a character that you have developed yourself. Okay, so the person is a thief, for example, and has stolen. He caused it, excuse me, we say that the action is as a result of antecedent conditions, yes, but for the self-determinist, he wants to still make a room for moral responsibility so that people can be accountable. So he says, well, yes, antecedent conditions, but those antecedent conditions really are in reference to what? Stuff internal to you. You have built that kind of character, anger, envy. You have certain desires. That's why you are stealing, because you are not content with what you have, for example. It's a character you have built within yourself. So you are still accountable. So self-determinists aim to make morality compatible with what? Determinism. They want to say that yes, you can be determinist, but still hold people accountable. Why? Because you would say that what determines their action is actually internal to them. It's as a result of desires, inclinations, attitudes that they have developed to form a character. It is their character that is leading them to behave the way they are behaving, and so they are still accountable. Okay. Now, for self-determinists, your actions or inactions can be judged moral or immoral, or you can be held accountable for them only if they actually reflect your intention, desires, attitudes, and so on. Would you hold someone morally responsible for an action unintended? So see the emphasis, unintended. If it is unintended, then we cannot blame you, says the self-determined. But where people acted as a result of their desires, their attitudes, as I've said already, intentionally. So you look into my face, give me a dirty slap. And when I say, why did you slap me? He said, it was meant to be. What will be, will be. That won't wash. The self-determined says that one is not unintended. It is intended. You intentionally did it. So even though it is there might be some antecedent conditions that led to that action, you can be held responsible for them. However, if I were stretching my arm across in the lecture room, and then as I was stretching, I was holding my pen. I'm only stretching, but then you are sitting behind me and the pen pricks your eye. You get hurt and whatever. Yes, you have hurt somebody. The action is wrong. But was it intended? Here, it would be seen by the self-determinist that that was not an intentional act. You didn't really intend to do that. Now the question that arises is whether anyone can measure the intention of anyone. That's a question for another day. But take note of how the self-determinist makes room for the possibility of moral responsibility, even in the face of the determinist view that they hold. The hard determinist, however, cannot accommodate any notion of responsibility since you are not the one. Whatever has, whatever supposedly you have done is as a result of external factors antecedent to you. So you are just like the pipe hose that the water just passed through. It was meant to be. So you were just used. It couldn't have been. You think of Judas Iscariot. If you were a hard determinist, where will you place him? And if you were a soft determinist, where would you place him? Did he act intentionally? If he did, then would you hold him accountable? Well, yes. And to what extent? Was he, inspired by external factors? Jesus said, I laid down my life and I took it again. So could it be that as for Judas, he was just a vessel? God says, I gave my son to the world, So who eventually killed Jesus? Okay, that is for your reflection. If we brought it to the determinist, soft and hard determinist discussion, then you would see how the thing pans out from the various perspectives. Some would say, well, he would have betrayed him anyway because it was meant to be. That's a hard determinism. If so, then why would he be held accountable or responsible for doing that which he was meant to do, which he didn't have any control over? Then the soft-determinist may say that, well, yes, it was meant to be. So the thing was programmed, but the actual acting of it, where he intended, he went, took some money, and then said that the person is here, I came to betray him, was still an act expressing his character. He was already stealing stuff. He was already greedy. He was already, antagonistic. Wanted to show the people that he is with power, and power has come to overthrow Roman, blah, blah, blah. So there might have been antecedent conditions, but it is as a result of his internal. That is the contention. Would you hold him responsible? The soft determinist may say yes. The hard one may say no, he has no role at all. It was meant to be. If he didn't cry, then he wouldn't have been fulfilling his called mandate as Judas Iscariot. Where do you place the discussion? Okay. Now, but think about this one, and then there comes a question that we can raise to the self-determinist. It may be that my choice or action is determined by my own character, but how did I acquire this character in the first place? The stone will never ever become greedy, or will never steal, will never rape, I hope. Because the stone doesn't even have that capacity, doesn't have the free will, doesn't have desire. You can expose yourself for all you like before your table. Your table won't rape you, dear friend, because it doesn't have that desire, the will to. But then human beings, like we learned from Ortega's paper last week, as we build on it, human beings have desire. They didn't choose it. They have choice. They have the capacity to choose. They didn't choose to choose. They are made to choose, to have desire, to want to eat, to want to be fulfilled emotionally, etc. So could it be that even where the self-determinists argue that it is your character that led to that, did I have a choice about it? Okay. I'm not talking about where you have groomed yourself to be a thief. I'm talking about the desire to want to eat. If it wasn't there, would you even start picking things and eating so much so that you will now become a thief? That is a question, it's a fundamental question to engage you in your reflections. Isn't my character on the screen now, isn't my character, attitude, desires, likes, and dislikes ultimately determined by factors outside me, as argued by the hard determinist? In other words, won't soft determinism ultimately reduce into hard determinism? Because the character, the attitudes that you claim are the result for my actions, and therefore I should be held accountable even if those things are present. Those characters are themselves developed as a result of factors external to me. So won't we ultimately, the self-determinist, won't self-determinism ultimately reduce to hard determinism so that the question of moral responsibility is hard to deal with? Well, Baron Dolbach thus concludes that all of our moral dispositions, that's the word, they are disposed to certain things that inanimate objects or even animals, some animals, are not disposed to. I've not seen a goat stealing iPhone or something. So there is a fundamental issue there. If you don't want to use animals, just use table and chair. A table will never rape you if you like. Expose your dresses and take off everything, go and stand before the table. It doesn't have desire. It doesn't go hungry. It doesn't need to drink water. But human beings do. And some of the reasons why people act the way they act is as a result of these, inbuilt desire, attitude, likes, dislikes, what have you. You see? And so it is my like that caused the action. Yes. So that would have been okay for the self-determinist to hold me responsible. But the question we are asking for our philosophical engagement is, would I even have had that like at all? If I had a choice, I would have said I should have been born like the stone. No desire, no need to steal, no need to fight over. I won't get angry if I am a stone, no matter what you tell me. But as a human being with emotions that I didn't choose to have, I was programmed to have emotions, to go hungry, to have desires, based on which I develop attitudes, likes, dislikes, and what have you. That is the antecedent condition that is external to me. And therefore, if I didn't choose those, but then they have been made as part of my being, which now informs certain attitudes I have developed, someone has become a womanizer. That one he contributed, but the antecedent condition was the ability to have desire. It wasn't his choice, it was given, it's part of his being. Then it is difficult to sustain self-determinism and distinguish it from hard determinism. Ultimately, it might seem that determinism proper is the view. And so the question of holding people accountable hangs in the loop. Now let's see how William James, who is a free willist, argues against the two. He would even diffuse the supposed self-determinism and say that there is just determinism and his view, indeterminism. There is no middle line for the reasons that I have outlined briefly. Okay, he thinks that if you want to soften the view, it doesn't add or subtract anything. It is either you are a determinist, a strict one, holding people, finding it difficult to hold people accountable because you presume that they already have some precondition, antecedent, conditions that are outside of the person's control, and therefore is accountable for the person's action. That's the determinist view. William James says, don't try to make it look good, or don't try to make room for moral responsibility by saying that there is a version of determinism that is soft. He says the soft determinist view diffuses into determinism anyways, so don't soften it. Now he puts them together and then he raises his critique against them. He argues for indeterminism, the opposite of determinism. He's a free willist and he feels that people act freely. So let's see how we capture that in simple terms for you, accessible to you for your level. Then perhaps when you advance and you want to do some more detailed reading of him, you can do. Indeterminism is the belief that some things and possibly the will are not causally determined. Some things and possibly the will. The will means your will to do and my will to do are not causally determined. So that it is possible to hold Adam and Eve accountable in the garden for choosing to eat from the forbidden tree. I'm referring to the Bible now. If you don't do Bible, just reference it, Google online and read to get the point of the reference I have given you. Okay. The point then is William James could say that everything about man may have been conditioned, but not his will. Okay, so there are certain things that you chose it. It wasn't preordained, says William James. The indeterminist, that's the free willist, argues that morality is a fact. He supposes that our will is not determined. Now we come back to the earth. You are accountable. We talk about right and wrong, good and bad, because it's a matter of fact, says William James. Your will must be free before it makes sense to tell you you shouldn't have raped your mother. You shouldn't have insulted your wife. You should give to the poor. These are statements of morality, and they already presuppose a free will, a will that is not determined causally. Rather, according to the indeterminist, our will is free. That is why indeterminism is a free willist view. So the name to remember for that is William James. Question to the indeterminist. We have a question though to ask William James and his cohort free willist. If choices and actions are not determined, then are they spontaneous, arbitrary, irrational, and uncaused? Are they you just act? Is there no antecedent condition that inspires action, that brings about the actions? Are they just arbitrary, irrational? Nothing caused the action. You just then you slap, then you started writing an exam. No, there must be reasons antecedent to the action. And if there is something that gave rise to that action, then that thing is what is causing your acting. Would we say that choices and actions are purely a matter of chance? No. There's purpose. There is intentionality. Our action, at least some of them, we act intentionally. You get up from a lecture hall, even sometimes during an exam, that is so important to you, and use the washroom. You get up and you start walking towards the washroom. There is purpose. There is reason. There is something that is making you move out. Okay, so your action is inspired by something. You don't want to wee yourself at the exam hall. No matter how important the exam is to you, you wouldn't want to do that on yourself. If you were the stone, then you wouldn't need to get up. You wouldn't want to wee, but a human being would want to. So you are acting purposely based on conditions that are antecedent to your being. You didn't choose to want to wee. It is part of what makes you human, to wee. See? And so when you get up to act, it is based on a reason, and I just gave you that instance, an antecedent condition. That is why we are asking the free willist. If you don't want to connect our actions to antecedent causes, then answer us. Are you saying that our actions are just spontaneous? Nothing causes anything. We are just there, then we start acting. No purpose, no intentionality. We are just arbitrary, irrational, spontaneous folks. You see, that's a question. What might the indeterminist or free willist mean by uncaused choices of free will? That's a question. What do you mean when you say that our choices are not caused? Therefore, they were freely chosen. Nothing pushed us to act that way. We just decided on our own volition to work that way. It's a problematic issue that they have to address. Now, this might be a case. What we engaged earlier was a question that we can ask the free willist so that they think through and then give us a response. But here, the second slide here is to give you an argument that the free willist, as the indeterminist, can make, okay, to defend themselves, to show why it makes sense to hold free willism than to hold determinism. The notion of regret is a strong case for the free willist. People regret what they have done. We all, if only I had known, I would have gone with the first bus. I thought that it was too rickety. I was waiting for the designer air-conditioned one. And now I'm 30 minutes late for the lecture. I regret. Now, see, if we regret for our inactions or actions, then it means that we admit that we could have acted otherwise. Then it means determinism is false, that we couldn't have chosen to do the opposite because we are programmed, so to speak, to act the way we did. So it couldn't have been otherwise. Then why do we regret? Why do you regret, having that guy as a chachiko? Hmm? Why do you regret eating that meal at the function? Say, me now, who told me to mix this okra stew with the jollof rice? What kind of combination was that? Because now you see the effect. But if determinism were so, then there is no point making that statement because what will be, will be. Okay? Finally, if you pass an exam, let me see what I put down for you. So I said, questions, the freewillist questions the rationale behind regretting some actions that happen if it is true that we live in a deterministic world. Example, a determinist must not regret that she failed an exam, since that action by the determinist argument is prearranged or programmed to be so. So there is no point saying, hey, I should have done my best. In fact, there's no point even reading or listening to this lecture. Because, if you were a determinist, you shouldn't bother. Because what will be. If you get an A, you get an A, even if you were never admitted into the University of Ghana. You will be at home and then you get an A in philosophical questions. That's amazing. We don't think that way. We don't live that way. We regret, we pass judgment, we hold people accountable, we express apprehension when we see morally reprehensible actions. We applaud people for their acts. That suggests, my dear friends, that we assume and we work with the grounds that people are able to choose. The question, however, is how free our choices are and to what extent we can admit of some degree of determinism, both in our internal attitudes, likes, dislikes, etc., and external factors that may condition how we do things. You want to be careful how you bring up a child because you may develop in the child a certain posture, certain desire that wants things done for them all the time. And before long, that is informing how they are handling their marital home, their schoolwork. When you are not there to push them, then it becomes an issue for them. Okay, then now they are looking back, and if you are not there, they can't do anything for themselves. See, but if people are developed, they grow up, then you are being a positive antecedent condition that may not necessarily determine what they do or not do, but inspires, influences how they act. So there is a case being made by the determinists, but the extent to which we can go to is the issue. At the same time, people don't always act freely. If an armed robber stuck a knife to your neck and said, rape your sister, otherwise I kill all of you, and then you find yourself raping that sister. How much of a free will did you have then? You acted freely, but was it from a free will? Question mark. You see, so the extreme case of saying that people are free and they choose what they want to do, and so they should be morally accountable, may also be problematic. We need to engage both, like we always do with our philosophical issues, pair the context, and make sure that we judge appropriately. Thus, for the indeterminist, morality is a fact of life. One may claim to be a determinist but cannot live meaningfully as a determinist. That is a case for the free willists. So some conclusions. Determinism may be impractical. Okay. Now, if you are very religious, like we all believe we are, you may have a determinist slant in certain contexts. You know that what God has said about you will come to pass regardless. You remember when we had our Ortega discussion. So some may not even do anything. Like I jokingly told you, You want to make babies, you have to do what you have to do to get babies. You don't do prayer to get babies. Prayer to open the door, but you have to act. You don't punch ATM figures to get a baby. You have to get busy, okay? Legitimately, of course. So the determinist view sounds a bit religious. At the same time, look at freewillism also. It is one thing that is emphasized strongly in religious faith, that we have been given our will. That is why we will be accountable one day, depending on which faith you hold on to. You see, so both extremes seem to have religious intonation. When we bring it to everyday life, both extremes seem to have some content. You tell the person that she didn't grow up from a good home. Her father was a molester. So this lady has a hurt person. The person has been raped before. So she doesn't want to have anything to do with the guy. That antecedent external issue is influencing, playing a significant role in how she's even gathering the courage to stand before people. Okay, so if the psyche is right, you will know how to merge the view of the determinist and that of the free willist, especially when you stand at a place where you have to judge actions, why people act the way they act. The law court, the hospital, you might be in a social gathering, some people who want to embark on a coup d'etat. Have you investigated what is causing what? Is it determined? Is it as a result of their free will? Have you seen your sick mother die out of hunger and no medicine? Could that inspire armed robbery? We don't want to suggest that it should, but if you diagnose well, are we able to help society? What do you think? And where do you stand? Free will determinism or a variation of it. Now, I'll leave you with this short quote. Life is like a game of bridge. The hand you are dealt with represents determinism. The way you play it is free will. The hand you are dealt with, you can't do anything about. But how you play it, you have a choice. Like Ortega said, we won't overlook the fact that we have been dealt with in ways that may not be too pleasant or may be too pleasant, but we always want to make sure that we are playing our role in what comes ahead, not what is given to us. I wish you well. Take note on the screen now. I have projected what I expect you will know now. Your interim assessment accounts for 30 marks of your final exam. 30 marks is due next week. That is the 5th week. We'll use the whole of this week to engage questions on this presentation and previous ones. And then the week following, which will be your 5th week, you would prepare to do your interim assessment. This is yours truly, Dr. Nancy Miles, for GMP. I end here until later. Bring me all your questions through my advertised channels. Go for tutorials. Make room for our online sessions this week. We have no in-person session this week 4. We don't have in-person lectures week 5, but we'll return for our final in-person lectures at various times in week 6. Have a wonderful, pleasant week and do take care.